For most of modern American history, each generation changed the country in its own way. The greatest generation built post-war America. The baby boomers reshaped culture, politics, and the economy during decades of rapid growth. Generation X adapted to globalization and the rise of the internet. Millennials transformed technology, social media, and digital life. But now a new generation is beginning to take center stage, Generation Z, and they may end up changing America more dramatically than many people realize. Because Gen Z is entering adulthood during one of the most unstable and transformative periods in modern history. Shaped by smartphones, social media, economic uncertainty, AI, remote work, climate anxiety, and a rapidly changing job market. As a result, their attitudes, priorities, and behaviors are very different from previous generations. And those differences are already reshaping American culture, work, politics, housing, technology, and even the future economy. So why is Gen Z changing America so quickly? To understand that, you first have to understand the world they grew up in. Gen Z is the first generation in history to grow up fully connected to the internet from childhood. They do not remember a world before smartphones, social media, streaming, or instant access to information. For older generations, the internet was something they adapted to. For Gen Z, it is the environment they were raised inside. That changes everything. It changes attention spans, communication styles, shopping behavior, social interaction, entertainment, education, and even identity itself. Unlike previous generations, Gen Z grew up in a world where global culture moves instantly. Trends spread across platforms within hours. News, entertainment, politics, and personal life all merge together online. This constant digital connection created a generation that is extremely aware of rapid change, but it also created intense pressure. Social media shaped how Gen Z sees success, relationships, beauty, careers, and status from an early age. Many members of Gen Z grew up comparing themselves constantly to millions of others online. At the same time, they also witnessed enormous instability. Many saw their families struggle during economic downturns. They watched rising housing costs make home ownership harder. They entered adulthood during periods of inflation, student debt pressure, and uncertainty about the future. This combination of digital hyperconnection and economic anxiety produced a generation with very different priorities. One of the biggest shifts is how Gen Z views work. For older generations, career success often meant stability, long-term employment, and climbing corporate ladders. Gen Z tends to approach work differently. Flexibility matters more. Work-life balance matters more. Mental health matters more. Freedom matters more. Many younger workers are less willing to sacrifice their entire lives for traditional office culture. Remote work accelerated this mindset. Gen Z entered adulthood during a time when millions of workers proved jobs could be done from anywhere. As a result, many young workers now expect flexibility as a normal part of employment. This is forcing companies to adapt. Businesses that fail to offer flexibility increasingly struggle to attract younger talent. Another major difference is how Gen Z approaches careers themselves. Previous generations often stayed within one industry or company for long periods. Gen Z is far more comfortable with constant change. Side hustles, freelancing, content creation, online businesses, creator economies, multiple income streams. These are increasingly normal to younger Americans. The traditional career model is weakening. Technology made this possible. Platforms like video apps, e-commerce systems, digital marketplaces, and online education created entirely new ways to earn income. A teenager with a smartphone can now build an audience, launch a business, or learn skills online without traditional gatekeepers. This changes economic behavior at a very deep level. Gen Z is also reshaping consumer culture. This generation spends differently, shops differently, and values brands differently than previous generations. Authenticity matters far more. Traditional advertising is less effective on Gen Z because they grew up surrounded by constant marketing online. They are highly skilled at filtering out corporate messaging. Instead, peer recommendations, influencers, short-form content, and online communities drive purchasing behavior. Brands increasingly adapt themselves to Gen Z culture because younger consumers influence trends far beyond their numbers alone. Fashion changes faster, music trends move faster, internet culture evolves faster, and companies are constantly trying to keep up. Housing is another area where Gen Z is changing America. Many younger Americans are delaying home ownership due to affordability challenges. Housing prices and rent costs have risen dramatically compared to income levels. As a result, Gen Z is often more flexible about where and how they live. Some prioritize walkable cities, Others move to smaller cities for affordability. Many are open to renting longer. Some embrace minimalist lifestyles or alternative living arrangements. Remote work also allows younger Americans to choose lifestyle over proximity to offices. This is reshaping migration patterns across the country. Mental health is another major generational shift. Previous generations often avoided discussing anxiety, burnout, or emotional stress publicly. Gen Z talks about these issues far more openly. This has changed workplace culture, education systems, social conversations, and even marketing strategies. Companies now increasingly focus on wellness, flexibility, and mental health support because younger generations expect it. At the same time, Gen Z also faces enormous mental pressure from constant online exposure, economic uncertainty, and social comparison. This generation may be more open about mental health, partly because they experience those pressures so intensely. Technology and AI will shape Gen Z more than perhaps any generation before them. Unlike older workers adapting to AI later in life, Gen Z is entering adulthood during the rise of automation and artificial intelligence. This means many young Americans already expect rapid technological disruption throughout their careers. The idea of one stable profession for life feels less realistic. Adaptability becomes more important than permanence. Learning becomes continuous. This could fundamentally reshape education and employment systems over time. Politics is another area where Gen Z is having major influence. Younger Americans tend to engage politically through digital platforms rather than traditional institutions. Social media plays a massive role in shaping opinions, activism, and cultural debates. This generation is also extremely diverse compared to previous generations, which influences attitudes toward culture, identity, and social issues. At the same time, Gen Z is not politically uniform. Many young Americans are skeptical of institutions in general, including corporations, government, media, and traditional systems. This skepticism may become one of the defining political characteristics of the generation. Education is changing too. Gen Z increasingly questions whether traditional college paths guarantee financial success. Rising tuition costs and student debt have caused many younger Americans to reconsider higher education entirely. Alternative pathways like online certifications, skill-based learning, entrepreneurship, and trade careers are becoming more accepted. This could reshape universities and workforce training over the next few decades. Another major shift is transportation and lifestyle priorities. Gen Z is less car-focused than previous generations. Many prioritize walkability, urban convenience, digital access, and flexibility over traditional suburban car culture. Environmental awareness also influences behavior more strongly among younger Americans. Climate change, sustainability, and energy issues are deeply embedded into the generation's worldview because they grew up hearing about these issues constantly. This affects consumer choices, political priorities, and long-term expectations about the future. But perhaps the biggest way Gen Z is changing America is psychological. This generation is redefining success itself. For decades, the traditional American dream centered around stable careers, home ownership, and long-term financial accumulation. Gen Z often defines success differently. Freedom, flexibility, experiences, mental well-being, time control, lifestyle design. These increasingly matter as much as income or status. That does not mean Gen Z lacks ambition. Far from it. Many younger Americans are extremely entrepreneurial and highly adaptive, but they often want success on different terms than previous generations. And because every generation eventually shapes the economy around its own preferences, America itself will gradually change alongside them. Workplaces will change, housing markets will change, education systems will change, technology will change, politics will change, cities will change. And the pace of cultural change may accelerate even further because Gen Z grew up in an environment where trends and information move instantly. Of course, Gen Z also faces serious challenges. Housing affordability, economic inequality, AI disruption, job instability, mental health struggles, rising costs of living, and uncertainty about long-term financial security. These pressures could shape the generation for decades. But historically, generations formed during unstable periods often become the ones that reshape society most dramatically. And Gen Z may be entering exactly that role. Because they are not simply adapting to a changing America. They are building a new version of it. One shaped by digital life, flexibility, technology, and entirely different expectations about work, success, and the future. And whether older generations fully realize it yet or not, that transformation has already begun.